Welcome to Hack Talks, brought to you by the NetWitness Incident Response Team. Your weekly dive into the hottest picks, the strangest twists, and you couldn't make this up moments in global cybersecurity. My name is Gordon Dixon, your host from Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm joined as always by Stefano Maccalia, the director based in Rome, Italy. Ciao, Stefano.
Hello, guys.
And James Sobel, senior manager in Merritt Island, Florida. Hi, James.
Hey, guys. Great to be here again.
So this week is our 10th episode. So we are going to do something different and count down the top 10 epic fails of the last 18 months. And in this part 2, we're down to our top 3 epic fails. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce one each and then select our podium, crowning the ultimate epic fail to celebrate our 10th episode. So let's kick off our top 3 with Stefano. What's the story you would like to share with us today?
Thank you, Gordon. Well, this is pretty famous, I think. Last year, in June, in 2025, researcher Bob Diachenko and Cyber News team found an unsecure Elasticsearch cluster on the open internet, holding roughly 631 gigabytes of data and roughly 4 billion records of Chinese users. The data appears to be a central surveillance-grade aggregation system from multiple sources and was including a lot of records from WeChat with residential records, financial data, Alipay data, phone numbers. Well, at the end, the root cause for this huge data leakage was breathtakingly simple. The Elasticsearch database was left online with no password or authentication on what researchers describe as a bulletproof infrastructure. So the server was taken down quickly after disclosure, and no clear owner was identified, but there were no doubt internal banner or org name by instance. So in that specific case, somebody in the surveillance of the Chinese citizens left his trove of data available to anybody, which is surely a sign of the carelessness of managing all these private data.
Wow, Stefano. I mean, just the scale and the scope and the carelessness. I mean, that surely is what gets it on to the epic fail list here, right? Just, it's large, it covers a lot of people, it impacts a whole bunch of people. And then the huge fail part there of just not caring to secure it. That is unbelievable.
Whoever built this surveillance super database apparently forgot the tiny step of where you don't publish it as a public service is better. So, you know, for me is a huge 10, this one.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I think that's a really important point. As the scale of the amount of data we're able to capture and manage, then what seems like a small error, a small oversight, actually can explode into something astronomical, you know, in scale. And I think that's really the frightening thing. The difference between one human error and the amount of data then exposed, you know, is something to not just keep you up at night, but to never let you sleep ever again, you know, safe in your bed. It's frightening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you're going to put it in the cloud, another nice lesson. If you're going to put it in the cloud, one small error makes a big impact.
Boom.
So there we are. That's the first of our podium to consider. So that's one. So the next one, James, you're going to share a story with us. What do you have?
Well, I don't have a pair of them on, but you've all heard of Nike. And the slogan, just do it. And in this case, it's just steal it or just give it away. It looks like back in January, Nike started talking about, them investigating into the potential loss of some of their IP. But what looks like happened was that the WorldLeaks extortion group was able to pull 1.4 terabytes of their data. This hurts, right? Not just, emails and things like that, but, manufacturing designs, intellectual property, the secret sauce, the crown jewels, whatever you want to use to describe this. This is the thing they're supposed to be protecting, right? The stuff that matters most. Ouch, this hurts. And I think the fail is that it's so big. How do you not notice that much data leaving your organization, right? And they denied this at first, right? No, not us, not our stuff. It became really obvious it was their stuff. Not being good stewards of this type of information really hurts. And it's funny, in this case, it wasn't so much about the customer's data. Although some of the customers involved in this, who buys this gear? Well, law enforcement sometimes buys it, right? Some of their customers end up being not just everybody's, John Q. Public, but, some big organizations. And here's a lesson in how just not being a good, responsible corporate citizen and keeping your own hands around your capabilities ruins people's lives, impacts people's lives, changes the business environment. And even if you're not exposing people's credit card numbers, might actually give customer data out on other things. This is rough. It's clear that this adversary had been in there for a long time. So just failures along the spectrum here, impacting a lot of people. And it's why I want to bring this up as a top 10, epic fail, just because of how big it is and how galling it is that an organization would just drop their intellectual property like that.
The observation about Nike, it's when it hits one of those, as you say, the kind of sort of something that everyone does. I think back to the Marks and Spencer's, attack that happened in the UK, and we mentioned in part one about the acai beer, something that impacts across the society because, like you rightly say, everyone buys, Nike sports gear in some form, and the amount of exposure across the board. It's not a niche. It's not a small group of people. It is potentially anyone and everyone, is at risk there. So yes, scary stuff. But yes, I happen to be wearing Adidas, but I'm sure that's something that's happened to them. Or will happen to them, I'm sure, in the future. So yes, so I've got one. And back in September 25, an extortion group calling itself the Crimson Collective breached a self-managed GitLab instance used by Red Hat Consulting for customer engagements. The attackers claim they exfiltrated about 570 gigabytes of compressed data from 28,000 repositories and Red Hat, plus multiple third-party analyses broadly aligned with that scale. So what it exposed was a haul that included customer engagement reports for roughly 800 plus organizations, plus internal project repos, infrastructure diagrams, network topologies, VPN configs and access details, authentication tokens, API keys, database URLs, and other credentials. There was pipeline configs and deployment playbooks, and in effect, a ready-made blueprint and keys for many customer environments. So it was a smart choice of target because of who they then went on to work with. And so the attackers got into a poorly protected environment that held highly sensitive consulting artifacts and secrets with insufficient segmentation and secret management controls. And like we just said, that blast radius, the impact over it meant that multi-reports such as suggest that stolen credentials were then used to probe and access downstream customer infrastructure. So what was taken in this attack then opened the doors for lots of other attacks and breaches further down the line. So this one point of breach turned into a multi-client supply chain incident and rippled through that entire area. So again, maybe not to the billions that we heard about in the first one from Stefano, but the consequences of who was attacked led to breaches elsewhere. So that's the scary story I'd like to share with us for consideration on the podium. So what do you think of this one?
I have a question, Gordon. Any personal entertainment data has been collected from these? Do you know?
I'm not sure on this one. Hopefully not. But you know, people
James,
people consult for everybody.
I think I bet you those personal entertainment sites use GitHub just like everyone else uses GitHub, and I think people think GitHub is some, you know, just go get that repository, just go get that code, just go. It is. You know, they like it's a secured software library, right? And this is a great example of, you know, I think so. It's there's an epic fail, Gordon, you pointed out, which is the of the primary players involved here in the initial attack on GitHub, but then it's all the individual players along the lines. So I think this is both an explosion, an attack initially, but it also has this giant blast radius, and it just keeps magnifying, and that's the scary one. And I'm sure there's some personal entertainment impacts as well.
Fantastic.
I think Crimson Collective basically carried out the illustrated magazine about how to breach somebody else's network. I mean, yeah. Literally, it was just lacking to be released on the public newspapers, but everything else was ready-made and ready to be carried out. So terrible.
Resistance is futile.
So there's our three epic fails for the podium, but of course now we have to choose a winner. So which of these three is our ultimate epic fail? So any thoughts on maybe which one is third of these three? Which one would we place in the bronze medal position? James or Stefano, do you want to comment on which one maybe is the least worst of these three epic fails?
You know what? While I want to vote highest for the story that I talked about, I think it almost comes in bronze, realistically, guys. You know, it's really an organization hurting themselves, and it's a huge failure on them, but most of the impact hits them. And where the other two, I think, have these giant blast radiuses, and that really changes the game. What do you guys think?
Yeah, from my perspective, I agree with you, James. Obviously, it was harmful, but it was harmful to the company. And I think from a certain degree, in this case, they were basically shooting on their feet. On the other two that we discussed, for different reasons, I think the impact was on third parties. So the lack of, let's say, proper controls upon the data release was not affecting directly the owner of the one that created the problem, but unfortunately the third parties. Yeah. And in the Chinese database, as far as I can tell you, it's kind of like they dropped the big worst book of all the details about Chinese citizen on a on a bench with a written on "do not read" on top. So it's kind of like obviously a no sense. So in my personal opinion, and not because I push it there, but I vote for this as the huge one in 2025. What do you think, Gordon?
Yes, I think I agree with the point that, you know, there's the ongoing impact and the wider range of people not necessarily directly affected, but have to be aware of not just, you know, your own organizational security, but the potential services that you use, and if they are breached, what does that expose? But although it affected a lot of people, my story doesn't quite have the numbers of Stefano's, I'm afraid. I can't. 28,000 or 800 plus organizations doesn't match up to the billions of people that were
Chinese
affected.
Citizens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And by the way, guys, just to make it clear, the data stolen, or let's say release from that leak, was potentially enough to create fake IDs, to create fake passports, to potentially interact with people, from collecting the chat of these people and their topics, faking the credentials or faking the authority or fake the or mimicking potential credible, let's say, people, and creating a lots of different frauds. So from that perspective, again, we cannot even evaluate how big is the impact on the daily life of the citizens that were having these credentials, these data, these files released. Luckily, now is no longer available, but we are discussing about millions of people. So it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Great training for AI, though.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, somebody's got to train those AIs. And
You will be assimilated.
you know, it's for the organizations and the people involved, this is certainly not a podium you want to be on, right? I mean, this is,
sure.
but I have to say, yeah, that database, you know, just going to the trouble of collecting all that information is bad enough in some sense. Not securing it, you know, and the amount and the blast radius really does put the epic in epic fail for sure.
Yeah. And to remind ourselves of you know, our original definition of epic fail, there's that scale that we've talked about, especially on these three, but to a certain extent, all 10 of the stories we brought to you in this special episode were preventable. These were things that could have been stopped from happening. And that's the key message, isn't it, gents, that we want to get across to our colleagues in cybersecurity, that you have to be vigilant and you have to be thorough and you have to always be investigating and scrutinizing, you know, where your exposures and where your weaknesses in your situation may be. So, yes.
And regarding these, we call it epic fails because it's not simply the question of, let's say, the outcome of a very sophisticated activity. All of 10 of these epic fails were generated by simply carelessness, nothing else. Simple release, leakage of data. There is no any in these 10 that were, let's say, the outcome of a very sophisticated activity, very technically sounding attack. Not at all. They went released unwillingly, even by the owner or by the manager of the data itself. So that is no sense, even because we are discussing about security and cybersecurity, at least from the last 30 years. So having in 2026, not in 2026, but in 2025, okay, it's kind of like the same, right? Situation like this, for these size of leakages is unbelievable, literally unbelievable. When I stumble upon the Chinese, but even when you told me before the shooting of these episode about the Red Dot or about the other one from James, it was embarrassing to listen to what happened from the cybersecurity, let's say, professional perspective. It's really embarrassing. That is no other way. So well deserved the podium for whoever was.
The reward is
getting
what
this
you
huge-
get, right?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
infamy and a lot of pain,
Mhm.
and well deserved by these 10.
Yes,
So
100%.
so that's us picked our
Mm.
ultimate epic fail of the last 18 months. But please, in the comments below, do share your thoughts. Is there one either from the three that we discussed for the podium, or was it one of the other ones? Do you feel that, you know, one of the previous stories that we shared were actually more epic and more ultimate a fail than what we've described just now? But we'll be back next week with a regular episode again. This was a special 10th episode anniversary epic fail countdown. And as always, it's a huge thanks to Stefano and James for joining me. And I thank you for tuning in. This has been Hat Talks from NetWitness Incident Response, and we'll see you next time. So it's goodbye from me, Gordon, in Glasgow.
Ciao from Italy.
Stay safe, all, from here in Florida. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
You have been watching Hack Talks.